Hey, everybody. I just want to talk structure for the rhetorical analysis essay. So, you're being asked to, you may hear my son singing in the background. I think that's going to be the new normal for all of us. Um, you're being asked to evaluate Gladwell's argument in chapter 4, right? And so, first you have to lay out his argument, and then you're going to evaluate it. So, I just want you to think about how you tackle this assignment, right? And tackle it just like any other essay assignment, which is break it into its parts and just think about how you want to go about structuring the essay. Remember, you have the examples of the student essays in your supplemental packet, so you can look at how they went about it. There isn't a single right way to do it. I'm going to talk about a couple of different ways in this video. So, for the moment, just forget about the intro and the conclusion. Let's just talk about the body and how you're going to execute the tasks that you have to execute for the assignment. So, outlining Gladwell's argument, right? We've been talking about a structure of identifying a claim, identifying the reasons that the author gives to justify their claim, and then the evidence that they use to back up their reasons, right? So, kind of trickling down in a bit of a triangle. And so, what you need to do is have a paragraph in which you say, in chapter 4, this is what Gladwell's main idea is. This is his claim, right? So, you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. And then you want to say, he believes this because those are his reasons, right? And then you want to give a sampling of the evidence that he provides to back up his claim. I don't expect you to detail every single bit of evidence that he has in the chapter, but you want to be able to say this is some of the major evidence that Gladwell provides in support of his claim. And in that paragraph, you notice down here on the bottom I wrote, don't forget to use quotation sandwiches. So as you're summarizing Gladwell's argument, that would be a really good place to have maybe 2 quotes from the chapter in which you're laying out what his argument is. After you've laid out his argument, then you can get into your evaluation. And there are a few different ways to do this. If you look at the sample student essays, you'll see a couple of the different ways that they approached it. And I'm going to give you a couple of other ways here that are pretty straightforward. So one simple way would be to have a paragraph about each appeal, where you evaluate ethos, you evaluate logos, and you evaluate pathos. That may be just the most straightforward way to go about it. Another way to do it might be to say you feel that Gladwell did a nice job on some of the appeals and a not so great job on other appeals. That could suggest a different way to structure it. You might then be able to have a paragraph where you combine, say, ethos and logos, because you think he did a good job on ethos and logos. And then you have a separate paragraph where you say, however, I don't think he did as good of a job, or I think he did a bad job with pathos. And then you would explain why you believe that with evidence from the chapter backing up your claim. So that would be a second way to structure. Another way to structure would be, like in one of the student essays you saw where they talked about, they went sort of chronologically through an argument. They said, they were doing a good job for the first part of the essay, right? But then towards the end, it wasn't as strong. And so in that case, they broke it up where, they talked about pathos and how it was good towards the beginning of the essay, but then they had another paragraph where they talked about how it was not as strong later in the essay. So another way to do it would be to move through the chapter basically from start to finish and talk about how Gladwell is doing things effectively or not effectively in each part of the chapter, right? So he typically divides his chapters into 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 sections, right? And so you might be able to say, in the first 3 sections, he did a good job with all the appeals. And then you could talk about how he did that. And then you could say, later in the chapter, he didn't do as good a job with like these 2 appeals, or whatever the case may be that you want to argue. And remember that any argument is valid. You might say he did a great job with all the appeals throughout the whole essay. you might say he did a terrible job with all the appeals throughout the chapter. Sorry, not essay, throughout the chapter. Or you could say something in between those two extremes. It's your evaluation. It's what you think in your evaluation of his use of the appeals. So as long as you have evidence to support your claim, it's legitimate. So those are ways to think about doing the evaluation. Okay, and remember, in your evaluation, you should be thinking about paragraph structure. So you're going to make a claim, and you have to have your own reasons and your own evidence, right? If you're going to say his ethos is strong, you want to have reasons why you think it's strong, and then evidence from the chapter that backs up your reasons and your claim. So once you've got that stuff sort of laid out, you might outline that first, then you can go back and work on your intro and move into your conclusion. And your intro and conclusion are going to follow the same structure that they've followed in the Dweck essay and the Lenz essay that we did, right? So your intro should start with a hook. Back in your second supplemental packet, you have examples of the different ways that you can do a hook, where you can start with a quote or a statistic or a story or an interesting fact. And from there, you should move into background, introducing the reading that you're going to talk about. And then your thesis, which is your claim, which is basically how effective or not effective you think Gladwell has been in persuading us. Okay, so you should just state that really clearly and, basically preview your body paragraphs. You kind of like, I think Gladwell does a pretty good job because of A, B, and C, or something to that effect. When you get to your conclusion, you're going to restate that thesis in, new language. And then remember, you have 3 strategies for adding something to an essay. To a conclusion in your essay. One is to predict the future. One is to solve the problem. So say there's something that you think Gladwell didn't do terribly effectively. This would be a great way to say what he could have done to strengthen that part of his argument. Or you could point to the larger implications. So in this case, it's like, in chapter 4, he's focused on dyslexia and desirable difficulties. So you could talk about the implications beyond the chapter, maybe for people with dyslexia or people with other learning challenges, or you could talk about the larger implications for, arguing about desirable difficulties or something like that. So I don't want to get too specific because I want you to kind of think about that on your own. But those are your 3 strategies for concluding. Predicting the future, you could try to predict the future for somebody with a desirable difficulty or something like that, or with dyslexia. And then bookend your hook, coming back to whatever you started with in your introduction, right? So signaling to the reader that they've come to the end of the story. So I hope that's helpful just in terms of thinking structurally through the essay. Remember, you've got resources throughout the module, and you've got me as a resource to answer questions and give you feedback. So get to it. Good luck.